Hey, this is Steve Goodner. I'm back with Emotionally Intelligent Living, Straight Talk with Steve. Before I get into this today, I always forget to ask if you're getting value out of these videos or any of the videos I've created, please subscribe and like and comment. I really would like to get more feedback. I'm not just trying to drive up subscription numbers. I really want to hear from people. So I hope these are helpful for you. Today, we're going to focus on self-limiting or self-limiting behavior. Um, let's talk about where that comes from. We all have things that we believe to be true about ourselves and about our place in the world. From those beliefs, we create rules that we live by. Those two things, our beliefs and our rules, actually generate our self-talk. And our self-talk is an indicator of our emotional state because the self-talk generates emotions. And so many times when I work with people, whether they're leaders or salespeople or owners of organizations or just people trying to live their lives, a lot of what I'm finding is that a large majority of the limitations that they face in life are self-imposed. They're putting those limitations on themselves. Now, I have a standard phrase that I use: don't self-limit. Other people will be happy to limit you. It seems like some people, that's their job, right? Is to try and limit you. But the reality is, so much of our limitations are directly related to our emotional environment. Now, people might say, wait a minute, Steve, I don't understand that. How does that work? Well, think about it this way. Let's say, for instance, that you're a salesperson and you say, I can't make cold calls. I'm no good at that, right? Well, it's not the statement that keeps you from doing it. It's the emotional drivers that are generated because of that self-talk. What are the emotions? Fear, anxiety, stress, all of those things. I mean, I see this constantly when I work with salespeople, and it could be leaders, it could be you in any place in your life where you're saying, I can't do that. I'm no good at that. And what I would ask you to do is add one word to the end of that. I can't do that yet. I'm not good at that yet. You know what we call that? We call it reframing, because we're literally trying to change the direction of our self-talk. So instead of the emotional drivers of fear, stress, anxiety, and all of that, maybe they become less aggressive. Maybe they become uncertainty, or maybe even a little bit of hope. Well, if I try it and get better at it, that's hopeful. That's something that I can work with. Self-limitation is a big deal, and I see it in so many people's lives. You know where it starts for me? So much of what I see is people who do not have a well-developed growth mindset. They have more of a fixed mindset. What does that mean? It means they have one way of doing things, or they have a set way of doing things. They don't really think about, doing it a different way. They don't come up with options. So they don't really want to learn or grow. They don't really think they need to develop new skills or try things a different way. That in itself is a huge roadblock. The people that will have a competitive advantage in life, whatever role, whatever industry you're in, doesn't matter. You will have a competitive image. I like that, competitive image of yourself. I think we should have that as a vision, but that competitive edge comes from that ability to be willing to grow, to be willing to receive feedback, to be willing to be coached, to be willing to ask other people, what do you see in me? Now, do it of somebody you trust. Don't just ask anybody. But that is so much of the limitation I see when I see self-limiting behavior is, first, people are not willing to grow. Now, I know the other thing people say is change. Change is awful. I'm tired of change. I don't want change anymore. Well, the reality is without change, there's no growth. And growth is change. I mean, it's just the very definition. If you grow, things are going to change. But they're also probably going to get better if you do it in a well thought out way, if your growth is intentional. And that is where we can start to move away from things like a fixed mindset and things like self-limitation into self-possibility or into potential realization. And you probably have heard it too. I'm sure maybe your parents or somebody has said to you over the years, you have so much potential. You need to bring out your potential, or, you have a lot of potential you're not living up to. Well, we all have those wonderful people in our lives, right? Thankfully, I don't have very many of those in my life anymore because, I've set up boundaries because I want to have a good self-image. I want to have good self-talk. I want to have a positive and productive emotional environment. That's what we're all about here. Emotionally intelligent living means getting down to the emotional drivers in any given situation. And in self-limitation, have you had people tell you in your life something that really strongly impacted you and you've carried that all this time? If it's something negative and something non-productive, you don't have to keep carrying that. But every time you think about it, it brings up those images or those feelings, those emotions of when you were a kid and somebody told you something, or whatever it happens to be. When it comes right down to it, the key here is you control what you believe to be true about yourself and your place in the world. You control your rules that you live by. You control your self-talk. All three of those things then generate your emotional drivers. So if we want to be smarter with our emotions, which is exactly the definition of emotional intelligence, then we have to be more intentional. And we can't allow ourselves to get stuck in patterns or habits. And that's something I wanted to bring in to the conversation today. So much of our self-limiting behavior and self-limiting thoughts and self-limiting beliefs is because we've allowed patterns to become habits that are non-productive or counterproductive. I have a unbelievably good assessment that I use with people that's called the habit story. So what is your habit story? It measures productive and counterproductive habits, and it measures your response patterns, and it measures your emotional state. All three of those very important measures, and especially your productive and counterproductive habits, because what we know is habits are something that we talk about a lot. There's a lot of books written about it. But until you actually measure your productive and counterproductive habits, you cannot change what you can't see. And we've all got blind spots. So when you start to think about this self-limiting behavior, it has probably evolved from habits that have been created that at some point in your life, those habits have rewarded you. Maybe even procrastination is a habit, maybe self-sabotage. I know it sounds crazy to think some of those could reward you, but they can. Maybe you avoid doing something you don't like doing and you get away with it. So you reinforce that habit. But somewhere down the road, that doesn't serve you very well. So when it comes right down to it, the whole point of what we're focused on today is how do we first recognize those patterns, which is a skill of emotional intelligence, and then how do we exit those patterns? And in the future, I'll talk about a change map that has been created by 6 Seconds, the largest emotional intelligence community in the world, where there's this negative cycle or this non-productive cycle of emotions: fear, frustration, and judgment. People get stuck in that negative cycle of emotions and they can't get out of it. But what if we could turn fear to courage, or judgment to curiosity, or fear, judgment, frustration, all of those things that keep us. What if we could turn those to more positive, more proactive kinds of emotional drivers that help us move outside of, like instead of being frustrated or disappointed or whatever, we start to get excited about the possibilities. Those are the more productive emotional drivers that we can put in place. I don't want to get too deep into the science of this here. That's not the point of these chats, so to speak, these videos. But I do want to help you understand, if you can recognize your patterns and the habits that they have actually created over time that are not helping you, the ones that are holding you back, there is a pathway to change that. And the very first step of that pathway is self-awareness, being aware of what those patterns and those habits are, so that you can, in the future, make a choice about staying in that pattern or habit or exiting out of it and trying something different. That is a wonderful first step in how to change self-limiting behavior, self-limiting thoughts. We don't control everything in our lives. You know that, I know that. As a matter of fact, there's very little that we truly have control over. But we can control our 4 most important resources: how we spend our time, our focus, our energy, and our effort, and how those become our responses to things. We control those. Your emotional environment, you control that. Even with all the circumstances in our lives and the crazy stuff that comes at us, and the valleys of despair that we go through, we still control and choose the emotional environment we live in. How does that happen? The longevity of an emotion in your brain is only about 6 seconds. The intensity reduces in about 6 seconds. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, the only way we continue to be mad or angry or frustrated and upset or whatever those things are is how long we choose to revisit whatever generated that emotion. Now, if you're in a good place and you're happy and things are going well for you, revisit that all you want. That's not a bad place to be, as long as it doesn't keep you from doing things you need to do. But that's why thinking about starting to create exit ramps off of this highway of non-productive emotional cycles is so very important. And you're unique. You are one of one. You'll have to figure out what your patterns and habits are. And certainly anybody who wants to reach out to me, happy to have a conversation about that. But the key here is start with a commitment not to allow yourself to self-limit. That's where it really needs to start. When you start there, you then have choices. Because if you decide, no, it's not worth it, I'm just going to stay in my self-limiting behavior, there's no choice there. You just continue to experience the same outcomes over and over. But if you choose a different path, who knows where that pathway leads? Have a great rest of the day.